Well, hello. Welcome to our Bible study again. I'm Fred Davis, pastor of the Mending Fences Cowboy Church. We meet in the former Reba McIntyre barn on Highway 109, just south of Gallatin. It's easy to find. It's a beautiful facility. We're very grateful to be there. We meet on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. If you're not actively involved in a church, we invite you to come to be a part of what God is doing in the fellowship of Mending Fences. In our studies, we've been going through the book of Acts. We're about finished. Matter of fact, we're in, I believe, the last chapter of the book of Acts. What we've been looking at as we've been studying Acts is the continuation of Christianity from the time of the resurrection of Jesus right on through to the time in which you and I are now living. It is called the church age. It started in Jerusalem in an upper room where Jesus spent time with his early disciples after the resurrection. So as the church age started, it continues all the way up to the present day that you and I are now living. It's important to understand that as we have looked at the book of Acts, we have been watching and seeing the activities of the early Christians. In other words, what they did, we should be doing now. How they acted, we should be living the same way. And that's what we've been looking at all through the book of Acts. We've come to the 28th chapter, or the last chapter of the book of Acts. And as we are looking, we are seeing the Apostle Paul. He's gone through all kinds of difficulty. I mean, he's been put in prison, he's been beat, he's been brought before the high council and had to explain his position of Christianity versus Judaism. And so we're seeing the last part in the life of the Apostle Paul. So in the chapter 28 or 27 and 28, we have been seeing that Paul has been on a ship that has been almost destroyed by a storm. They end up on the island of Malta. God has used Paul to perform some great miracles that showed and demonstrated the power of God that was on the life of the Apostle Paul. So in chapter 28 and verse 11, it says, "It was 3 months after the shipwreck that we sailed on another ship that had wintered at the island, an Alexandrian ship with the twin gods as its figurehead." In other words, if you were to look at this ship, you saw the images of two gods that were figureheads on the ship. And so our first stop was at Syracuse, where we stayed 3 days. From there, we sailed across to Rhegium. A day later, a south wind began blowing. So the following day, we sailed up the coast of Putera, there we found some believers. Here they are on an Alexandrian ship that has two foreign gods' images on the ship. As they continued to sail, they ran in to some fellow believers. That was so important to the Apostle Paul because of all the difficulties that had taken place. These believers had invited us to spend a week with them, and so we then came to Rome. The brothers and sisters in Rome had heard we were coming, and they came to meet us at the Forum on the Appian Way. Others joined us at the 3 taverns. When Paul saw them, he was encouraged and thanked God. Whenever we're going through the struggles of life, it is important that when we find other believers, this could be at church, it could be in a small group, we need to spend time when we're going through difficulties with other believers. And that is what Paul saw. He was encouraged and he was grateful to God. When we arrived in Rome, Paul was permitted to have his own private lodging, though he was guarded by a soldier. So, here we see Paul in the latter days of his life. If anybody had ever suffered, it was the Apostle Paul. So, here he is in Rome, and he is under guard. In verse 17 of chapter 28, 3 days after Paul's arrival, he called together the local Jewish leaders. He said to them, "Brothers, I was arrested in Jerusalem and handed over to the Roman government. Even though I had done nothing against our people or the customs of our ancestors. The Romans tried me and wanted to release me because they found no cause for the sentence of death." In other words, the Apostle Paul was faithful to the Jewish traditions, but he was also faithful to the new gospel of Jesus Christ. And so he is sharing with these Jewish leaders what he had gone through. And so the Romans tried me and wanted to release me because they found no cause for the sentence of death. But when the Jewish leaders protested that decision, I felt it necessary to appeal to Caesar, even though I had no desire to press charges against my own people. You see, Paul was very dedicated to his Roman heritage. So he wasn't wanting to press charges against his own people. Verse 20, I ask you to come here today so that we could get acquainted And so I could explain to you that I am bound with these chains because I believe that the hope of Israel, the Messiah, has already come. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot to us, but it meant a lot to these Roman leaders. You see, in Judaism, those people are still looking for the coming Messiah. They could not accept or believe that someone like Jesus, who was not born of royalty, was in fact the coming Messiah. They just simply could not believe that. But the Apostle Paul had come to believe that the Messiah had already come to the Jewish people by way of a miracle of a virgin who bare a son. His name was Jesus, and he had already come, but boy, they struggled with accepting the position that Paul had taken. So, when he was telling them that the Messiah had already come, they replied, "We had no letters from Judea or reports against you from anyone who has come here. But we want to hear what you believe, for the only thing we know about this movement is that it is denounced everywhere." So, it is very important what we believe. Jesus, when he walked upon the earth, said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So, this is contrary to Jewish teaching, because they are still looking for the coming Messiah. But Jesus was saying, "I have already come." It is important what you believe about Jesus Christ. The Jewish people had a real hard time with the belief that Paul was proclaiming. And so it was difficult. But it is so important what you believe. It's not as important what religion or denomination that you hold to. What is important is that you believe that Jesus Christ is in fact the Son of God who came to this earth, and at the prime of his life, he was crucified on a cross to pay for our sin. As a matter of fact, what you believe about that determines whether or not you will go to heaven. Because everything is based upon your belief in Jesus Christ. So they are saying to the Apostle Paul, "We've heard what you believe. For the only thing we know about this movement is what that is denounced everywhere." In other words, all throughout Rome and the Jewish community, they denounced the coming of Jesus Christ as the Messiah. whether you believe that or not, makes all the difference in the world. Jesus Christ, in the Old Testament, it was prophesied and told that Jesus would come, that he would be rejected and despised by men, and that's exactly what happened to him. He was taken and was crucified on a cross. He was God-man. And when he died on a cross, he paid for our sins. Every sin that you and I have ever committed was laid upon him when he died on the cross. He took our sin upon himself. That's why the crucifixion of Jesus was such a horrible experience, because they weren't just killing a man. That man was paying for our sin on the cross. The Roman community rejected this. The Jewish community rejected this. They denounced this. But it is the heart of the gospel of Christ. We're going to pick up with verse 23 when we come back together tomorrow. We hope that you'll join with us as we study together in these last days of the life of the Apostle Paul. You have a blessed day.